All right. So here we are. You're in the right place. How can we, as leaders of nonprofits at this critical time, build corporate sponsorship and earn revenue? We've been all hearing probably the word diversification, diversification ad nauseum, and there's a lot of meaning behind that right now in terms of how we move forward. And this is, at least for our clients, we know one of the least explored options, but can be one of the most fruitful. So we're really excited to have Gail here to share a little bit more about that and get your questions answered today in our expert session. Just if you're new to Impact Launch, we are a women-led, women-run social impact firm of consultants. We're a collaborative of consultants that all have worked in many nonprofits for decades before launching Impact Launch. We now work with many organizations across California and beyond, and appreciate working with nonprofits, philanthropy, and local government to maximize impact through best practices and strategy-driven results. And some of the insights that we've been seeing that drove us to want to do this specific topic with you all, we're seeing and none of this is probably new news to you, but a widening gap in resources in terms of those large, well-resourced nonprofits that are already well established are gaining ground right now, actually. Whereas because there's so much trust built and awareness of their brand, et cetera, while smaller and medium nonprofits are facing more instability, closure, and tough choices. And then that capacity is the hidden driver of diversification success. So we know that when we don't have capacity to take on the strategies that we know we need, leadership capacity, strong systems and strategies, solid pathways for consistent relationship building, that can really hamper our success. As much as we want to diversify, we need to have those building blocks in place. And then lastly, and what we're really here about today, is the strongest organizations think in terms of revenue portfolios, not just streams. What do we have in terms of core stable resources? How do we lean into those and really make sure those are solid right now? How do we have flexible fundings, individual donors, general operating support? And what we're here today for is those growth bets, earned revenue, new partnerships, sponsorships, things that we haven't explored that we could really strengthen for our nonprofit. So that's why we're here today. We're going to jump in with my friend Gail and have a really rich session today. And so, with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Gail Bauer.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, and it's nice to meet everyone in Megan's community. And those of you, Kelly, I could see you on the bottom of my screen, and Stacy, I see you in there. Thank you so much for being here today. And to all of you listening at home or in your offices after the fact, we welcome you too. We are so excited to present this topic. And if you are like most nonprofit leaders right now, you are equally concerned about all the change and perhaps the risk in, as Megan said, your portfolio of revenue between federal cuts that will most assuredly have a domino effect as we go forward into the state and municipal level. And then tax law shifts and changing demographics. And, now we have a war and there are tariffs and there are all kinds of things that are affecting revenue that affect the revenue that you generate from traditional sources of nonprofit revenue. And at the same time, you may be equally curious about other forms of revenue, these bets that Megan mentioned, around corporate sponsorship and earned revenue. And yes, I definitely agree. There is definitely a lot of opportunity here. And that is the nature of the work that my firm offers, to help organizations not necessarily replace the traditional forms of revenue that might feel a little risky right now to have such dependence on it, but to help create more of a cushion and to be able to generate revenue whenever you want it so that you can become a little bit more self-sufficient, or a lot more self-sufficient if all goes well. And so we wanted to share this Ask the Expert session to help you understand what goes into it, what the infrastructure is, because one of the things that I see in my work is that organizations just decide we're going to just get started. So they'll say things like, we're going to just call our bank. Somebody just said this to me last week. I was speaking to someone who's running an organization about to celebrate its 20th anniversary. And he said, yeah, we're going to call our bank to become a sponsor. And I said, well, like, what are you going to say when you get your banker on the phone? So there's more involved in just calling your banker. Like, you wouldn't start a program for your organization if you work with children or it's a healthcare organization, you wouldn't just say, yeah, we're going to start this program. You would put more thought into it, more strategy, more evidence-based background and systems into place so that you were starting on a good foot and so that you could start and be somewhat assured of having some success. So the same analogy works here. There are steps that you have to take. You don't just call your bank. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But the other things that I hear are if we just had someone to find sponsors for us, then we could afford to hire this person. Or let's go just email the PDF of the gold, silver, and bronze packet, which emailing the PDF is not such a great idea. And gold, silver, bronze, will only get you so far as well. Or I hear people say, we have this great idea that we want to launch. And that's great, but there are many, many more steps. And having the steps is not there to be a nuisance. It's there to be able to help prevent starting something that's not going to be successful that could then become a waste of time for you, or to really launch on the right foot and have the capacity, have the bandwidth, and most of all, lead with pricing that's going to be effective as well. So my name is Gail Bauer, and I have a consulting firm, as you can see. I work as an advisor, a consultant, a speaker, and my work revolves around helping nonprofits and associations and mission-driven businesses to increase their visibility, their revenue, and their impact. And my clients have launched sponsorship programs or new sources of revenue, or they've launched new strategic plans, or we work on the marketing, or we focus on sustainability. But clients that have launched revenue have expanded their revenue by doubling, tripling, and quadrupling their revenue. And so I know that there are lots of possibilities out there, and hopefully some of the ideas that you learned today will work in your organization or get you thinking. My work has in sponsorship came from producing very large scale music festivals, some of the most important music festivals in our country, like the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, the Newport Jazz, Newport Folk, and many others, Essence Music Festival. And so I've got more than 35 years of experience in corporate sponsorship, and my work has been cited, or I've been a source for some of the leading publications and media outlets, not just in the US, but around the world. And I've worked with all kinds of organizations across the country, small organizations, statewide, region-wide, national and international, and then in a wide range of industries from the arts to healthcare, scientific organization, disease organizations, economic development, environmental, and many, many others. So I love working with leaders that are, at least on the journey of their entrepreneurial careers, or they like kind of switching things up. So that's kind of what I like to do. So now that you know a little bit more about Megan and me, we'd love to hear more from you and where you are on your journey. So I'm going to ask you each to go to the chat and type in one number about where you are with your either earned revenue or sponsorship program. So type in one if you're just starting. Maybe this session today is your first entree into what earned revenue or corporate sponsorship is all about. Type in number two if you're just dabbling. Maybe you just got started with something and you're still playing around. And I don't mean dabbling in a pejorative way. I mean it in a good way. Like you're just kind of getting started. Number three, you've got one source that you've launched and things are rolling along. You see more potential, but you're just getting started really. Four, you're looking to expand. You've got several sources of revenue, or maybe you've got one source that you're really cooking with, but you see opportunities for expansion. And five means that you have earned revenue and or corporate sponsorship is a major source of revenue for your organization, and you are just rocking it when it comes to earned revenue. So as if you could type in the number where you are, let us know where you are, that would be really helpful. And while you're doing that, unless we have everyone in there, do we think we
A
have it?
lot of people in there already. Lots of a big span. Lots of ones, lots of threes, lots of fours, no fives.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Everyone's in the right place. So that is good. And it's wherever you are. I'm really glad you're here. You're going to take something away. Even if you are number five, I bet you'll learn something. So as we're going forward, I'm just going to share a little bit of content and then we're going to get into questions. So first comes first is what you can expect. This is our agenda today. So I want to just give us a little primer on various topics to get us all in the right frame of mind. Most of our time is going to be spent answering your questions. First, we're going to kick off with talking about financial resilience and some ingredients you need for that. You don't even know what you need yet, but that's what I'm going to talk about. Then I'm going to do a primer on both earned revenue and corporate sponsorship so that that we're all operating with the same definition and we're thinking about this the same way. Then we're going to get into the infrastructure steps that I talked about so that you could, by the next fiscal year, have your infrastructure ready to go, and so that you could be launching sometime early in your fiscal year. Again, most of our time is going to be spent answering questions. I will just say that I would suggest that you hold off of asking questions that are accounting or legal in nature. I am neither an accountant nor a lawyer, so I would ask your accountant or your lawyer those questions and ask me different questions. And of course, the answers to the questions are information only because we have no idea. I don't know much about your I don't know anything about your organization. So I'll do my best to answer the questions and there's certainly more that you would want to explore. And then before we wrap up, I'm going to share some resources and special gifts. And Megan, of course, is going to have some final remarks and final comments. And we're going to send you off into the world inspired to create earned revenue and corporate sponsorship. That's our goal. All right. So, back in 2020, I collaborated with a different colleague of mine, and we decided to find out what was really going on in the beginning of the recession, sorry, the pandemic around nonprofit revenue. We've had in all the 21 years that I've had my consulting practice, we've had a lot of emergencies. We had the recession in 2008-9, and then of course we had the pandemic, and now we're moving into some other uh, situation. And there's an instruction, there's information that we can learn. And one of the things that we learned when we co-authored this study in 2020 was that many people were very worried about their revenue. Of course, that's what you would imagine people would think. So 76% of the respondents to our study uh, let us know that they were very worried about their revenue. They were feeling very negative. They were very worried, very concerned. They didn't know what they were going to do. There was just a lot of almost panic. And then usually in a study, you focus on where the biggest results are, and that 76% was the biggest results. But what Karen and I found to be more curious was that 24% of people were not worried. In fact, they were feeling great about moving forward. They were positive, they were creative, they were focused on the right things, including building relationships. And we thought, well, isn't that really interesting? So that's where we really focused on our recommendations in this study. And I continue thinking through this. And now my focus in a lot of my work is around financial resilience and what it means. And so the first thing that I want to say in terms of getting through this period with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of change and a lot of adaptability, like every day there's just something new that we have to take in and absorb and try to figure out how it works and what it means for our organizations. But I want to encourage you to stay in this second quadrant. Innovation and resilience is where this quadrant will take you. So if you think about this quadrant, what this is showing is vision and preparation is the top half, and on the right is your mindset. So if you can maintain a positive mindset and create a vision for where you want to go in the future and be prepared, that's where innovation and resilience continues to grow. If you're staying the course, even though you're positive, which is quadrant 4, you're not factoring in all the things that are happening around us. And therefore, you might be taking the organization and the strategic plan that you created before the election in 2024, But that doesn't mean that it's going to get you to the right destination. You know, if a rocket is sent up in space that's only off by like 1%, it's going to the wrong planet. So we have to take in what's going on around us and adapt and remain resilient. And similarly, if we've got a vision and we're preparing, but we have a negative mindset, we're going to be in quadrant one, which might mean that you're planning for the worst. You know, somebody last year said that they were thinking that they would cut their salary so that they could pay their staff members. And I just said to her, you're focused on the wrong part of the balance sheet. You're focused on the expense side. You need to focus on the revenue side. And then, of course, there are some people that are just literally freaking out. Or I hear this less now, but that's what can happen if we're in quadrant three. So I just want to encourage you, no matter what, try to remain positive and try to create a vision that moves forward. And that's how you maintain innovation and resilience. And that's where we want you to go. All right. So, what is earned revenue? So, many of you probably know that revenue for the nonprofit sector comes from one of two sources. It's either contributed or it's earned revenue. And on the right side here, let's start with contributed because this will be easy. You all know what this is. Contributed revenue, it looks like a gift or a grant, and it's restricted or it's not. When it comes from an individual, it's a donation or it's a gift. If it comes from a corporation, it's a corporate gift or it's a grant or it's a grant from an institution or it could be a government grant as well. Earned revenue, on the other hand, is an exchange of value. You have something of value that somebody can buy and use and make their lives better, and you have and that person is willing to invest in that value. So if you've ever been to a university or you've ever been to a hospital or you've ever been to a museum or a concert by a nonprofit performing arts organization, you have contributed to that organization's earned revenue by, you know, your insurance payment or your tuition payment or buying a ticket or going to the gift shop at the museum or whatever. But these are all forms of earned revenue. And again, nobody's getting rich by buying a ticket to a performance, but all those tickets add up and all those tickets throughout the year add up. And then there are other forms of revenue as well. So you can see how this cushion can grow and at least provide you with some little form of comfort and self-sufficiency. When this revenue is earned revenue and it comes from the corporate sector, it looks like corporate sponsorship. Now, your accountant might post this as a donation, but I'm not going to get into that. It is a form of earned revenue because there is an exchange of value. So we're not here to talk about accounting policies, okay? So talk to your accountant, talk to your legal staff. And then there can also be fees for service. You might have some form of expertise or something that could be valuable to the corporate sector or the small businesses or whatever that they would be willing to pay for. So these are all forms of earned revenue. And if you piled all the nonprofit revenue that all the 1.6 or 1.8 nonprofits in the entire country, you piled all the revenue into a big pile and then sorted it out by type, unbelievably, 49% comes from fees for services. And this includes universities and hospitals. But then there's government grants at 30, almost 32%. Now, this data is from 2018. I've never seen this data pulled together like this. Although I just saw something kind of similar, but it's still very high that nonprofit revenue comes from fees for service. And look at this little range right here. These are the traditional forms of revenue. So you and 1.6 or 1.8 million nonprofits are all battling it out for individual gifts and bequests and corporate gifts and foundations. And it doesn't really make up such a big percentage of nonprofit revenue. So there is potential here. Maybe not for each and every one of you, but there is potential and it's worth taking a look at if that is something that you have the bandwidth to explore. Now, where do you look for earned revenue? So I have cataloged more than 91 different sources of earned revenue, and generally they come from one of three places. Number one, they're an asset, something that your organization owns or produces, whether it's a hard or a soft asset, can be monetized. Number two, you might have points of leverage from some mission inspired program or service that could find a new audience, or some kind of collaboration that could generate revenue in itself. Or number three is what I like to call marketing mojo. So it's some marketing inspired source of revenue, like corporate sponsorship or an event or a trip or merchandise or something else that builds visibility for your organization as it also builds visibility. I'm sorry, it builds revenue as it also builds visibility for your organization. So those are the three primary sources of earned revenue. And now let's take a look at corporate sponsorship. What is corporate sponsorship? So most nonprofits know that corporate sponsorship is a form of revenue for them, but they often don't think about it from the perspective of the corporation. And when you do, that's when you can have a lot more leverage. That's when you can start to have insights into what you can offer and what you can do with the corporate sector that can be really valuable for them, that they're willing to pay very good fees to be able to access. So corporate sponsorship is actually a marketing medium, and it's actually a very powerful marketing medium. And I know this from, all the multiple events that I worked on year after year after year. So corporate sponsorship is really an exchange of value that you have that comprises marketing assets and event assets, or it's tied into other initiatives or campaigns that you've got going on, that the corporate sector or the business sector is willing to pay you for access to that value through a fee that's either cash, which we all know what cash is, or something that's in kind. And when I say in kind, it largely removes something from your budget. Okay, so it's not a sample, it's something that removes something from your budget. So that's what corporate sponsorship is. And the most important feature of corporate sponsorship is that it's experiential. As a marketing medium, it's experiential. It enables your audiences, your community to be face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart with the corporate brand or the corporate representative, which is enormously valuable in this increasingly digital age where we can spend our lives on Zoom and never see somebody's eyeballs, right? So being able to interact and touch and feel another organization's product, or interact with someone and hear more about their service can be infinitely valuable to that corporation and how their sales process works. So that's a little bit more about earned revenue and a little bit more about corporate sponsorship. I'm sure I've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a primer. And now I want to talk about this infrastructure. So when you think about developing earned revenue or developing a corporate sponsorship program, generally at a very high level, there are about 6 steps that you're going to want to go through. Number one step is to really set strategy that accommodates this kind of work, that this kind of revenue stream. And you've all heard the idea that culture eats strategy for lunch. There can be impediments in our culture to having these forms of revenue that you have to think about in your strategy. So we need to set a commitment to diversifying revenue. And once you go through this cycle once, you're going to be growing this unrestricted revenue in the next phase. But you need to be thinking about creating the right culture so that and the right elements so that your strategy of diversifying your revenue with earned revenue and sponsorship can really work. Step two is around mindset. So we talked a little bit about this in terms of financial resilience, and the deeper way to think about this is to and what something that I do with my clients is to really encourage entrepreneurial nonprofit leadership. Entrepreneurial nonprofit leaders, even if you're just getting started, which by the way, this is a learned skill, tend to be curious, confident, and creative. They're willing to take risks. They're not afraid to fail. Now, I'm not saying like abject failure and it makes your organization go under, although I have seen that, not my client, but I have seen that too. But willing to take risks, willing to try new things to see what's going to work and see where it goes in the culture and adapt beyond that. Step three is to think about the value. Before you can sell something, before you can develop this earned revenue source or a corporate sponsorship program, you need to have value that you exchange for this fee that I talked about. So, in both cases, earned revenue and sponsorship, it means that you have to assess your organization to see where there are opportunities. Maybe you have 3 or 4 events, but maybe not every one of them is ready for corporate sponsorship right now, or even appropriate for sponsorship. You might not want corporate sponsors at certain of your events, but you may. So we have to really think about the organization and take a look around to see what is ready for sponsorship or for other earned revenue opportunities. And then we create this inventory of assets. What would this earned revenue form look like? How would it work? What goes into it? Same with sponsorship. What are all the assets that we'd pull together to generate this sponsorship program for our corporate partners? And all the while through this stage, you're focusing on the return on investment for your customer or your corporate sponsor. Step four, which probably happens simultaneous to some of these other steps, is you need to really be thinking about your team. When I work with organizations, quite often organizations do not have a whole team ready on the get-go for taking any one of these steps, launching a new earned revenue form or starting a sponsorship program. So we kind of cobble together what skills already exist in the organization to get things going. It's always great when various leaders understand how sponsorship works or how their new earned revenue form works. And that way, when you do bring somebody in, if that's the goal, you bring somebody in and you understand how it works so that you're better able to manage that person. Also, you may need to be thinking about the skills that are needed. So this could be new skills that you can acquire through hiring somebody or new skills that you acquire through training and development. So there's a whole skill piece. Next, in step five, is processes. So every business model has certain requirements. Think about your business model as the system of how your organization generates revenue. And every system has different drivers. You have to do a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that or whatever. But every business model needs marketing. If nobody knows about your new program, your new event revenue source, then they can't buy it. So you need marketing, you need a sales interface so that somebody's talking to your customers or talking about your to your corporate sponsors and putting together something meaningful for them. You need to have operations and a delivery mechanism, and that you also need to have policies for your organization so that you have the best chance of success. You don't want to have people that are actually sabotaging having corporate sponsors, or disappointed when that somebody is really successful bringing in sponsors, and your board didn't understand what it looked like or what it meant for the organization, and then they put the kibosh on the whole thing. I've heard people tell me those kinds of stories as well. So you want to make sure that you create policies so you have guardrails to make sure that sponsorship or your earned revenue source can work well and function well in your organization. And then finally, you get to step six, where you launch, but you continue to measure and try to figure out your benchmarks. And then going forward in the next round of this, you figure out ways to improve, and you improve the systems and the operations so that you can continue operating more efficiently and continue to add more value so you can continue to generate revenue or expand your fees, expand your pricing. And then it just continues as a renewable asset for your organization. So these are our 6 steps to new revenue success. And hopefully this doesn't sound completely overwhelming, that it feels like a manageable set of steps that you can take for your organization. And of course, there's a lot more to think about, but at a high level, for what you might need at this point, these are the things to be thinking about for your organization. Okay, so now I want to move to Q&A, and I'm going to stop the screen share, and I want to hear all your questions. So if you want to start entering them into the chat, and Megan can help with reading them off, or I'll go into the chat, whatever, however we want to do that. And let's get going. Let's answer those questions.
Great. This is where a lot of the learning comes. the insights that you have, questions, things you're thinking about. Who's got one to start us off? You could also raise your hand.
Yes, and unmute.
Yeah, got one. Okay, Weston, if you were advising a nonprofit led place based initiative that creates highly experiential community gatherings, where the value to a sponsor is not just logo visibility, but trusted relationship building, community insight, and meaningful association with civic well being, how would you frame and package that offer so a company like Apple can clearly see it is a worthwhile marketing and partnership investment while still keeping the nonprofit's mission intact and the ask is simple enough to sell?
Okay, that is a question and a half. Let me take a look through that. That is the longest question, but that's good. All right, if you were right now, place-based.
I can give an interpretation to this question. When I was with a nonprofit, tried to get funding from Google, and at the time they said, we really don't fund collective impact initiatives. So things that are community based, really aligned with what we are doing, or don't always translate to corporate speak. How do we get their ear
Yeah.
while
Well,
staying aligned?
yeah, I didn't weave this into the talk because we wanted to keep it short and really focus on people's questions. But there's another way that I like to talk about sponsorship, which is it's a term that I coined called social sponsorship, where the social impact mission of the business can marry with your social impact, with your mission. But there's got to be a really good fit. So back to the original question, remember that corporate sponsorship is it's a marketing avenue. And so when we're thinking about corporate sponsorship, we're thinking about your audiences and providing access to your audiences in ways that are going to be acceptable in your world. So Apple is a company that is trying to reach the entire world of people at a certain demographic level, 25 to 54, blah, blah, blah. And so if your organization is very place-based, it's very geographically oriented, you want to find sponsors that are also operating in the places where you are, because otherwise there's a lot of wasted circulation for Apple. So wasted circulation is an old advertising term where if you're advertising to too many people, you're wasting money because you don't need to reach all those people. So if Apple is trying to reach a lot of people and your organization is focused on a smaller geographic area, so you need to find people that are also trying to reach the people that you're also serving. So that's the first thing. Let's see. So where the value is not just logo, just be, yeah. So trust has to be high, and you've got to design your sponsorship program so that it really works, and you are continuing to provide value for not only the sponsor and for your organization, but also the people in your community, whatever, however you define community. So for the people that aren't place-based. So how would you frame the pie? Well, so another thing, so the way that I would frame any sponsorship is in terms of what is in the best interest of the sponsor. And so that means you need to do a little research on the company and figure out, number one, does this sponsorship even make sense for Apple or whatever the company is? And if it does, why? Why does it make sense? How will they be better off as a result of sponsoring your event? And what's in it for them and what's in it for you and your audiences? Does that help, Weston? You can
Totally.
unmute if you'd like. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, definitely. That was very helpful. I appreciate it. And thank you for taking the like really verbose question.
It was good. It was very, very well structured sentence. Thank you.
Thanks, Weston. Suzanne, when launching a new sponsorship program for a special event fundraiser, what do you think moves businesses most to consider sponsoring your event? What part of the ask is most compelling for them to agree to sponsor?
Well, it again, it depends on the corporation. If we're talking about a fundraiser, a lot of times organizations focus on gold, silver, and bronze packages, which are very generic. And I like to encourage my clients to think about these as more like they're really more like gifts. So some corporate sponsors in that camp really just want to support your mission. They want to be part of it, they want to make a gift. But true corporate sponsorship, again, has some marketing component. And there are a whole host of reasons that businesses might do that. They might want to sell their product and, they're trying to sell their product and service. That's basically what it all comes down to. A corporation, any business, even your organization is trying to sell something. So they're trying to sell something. They are trying to do complete a set of activities that leads to selling that product or service. So they're building visibility, they're building thought leadership, they're building relationships, they are launching a new product. They are driving traffic into their store or onto their website. A whole host of things might be part of it. So again, similar to my answer to Weston, is that your goal is to, or your job is to do a little research to figure out what you think the sponsor's objectives might be and how the unique value that you have to offer might be of interest to them.
Great.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks, Suzanne. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Great.
So Cindy's asking, how do you break through to the connection? How do you break through to the connection that are the ones that make the decision, getting to the decision makers within a company without a direct contact?
Right. Well, getting to somebody that you don't know would be that's not the first route that you would want to take. You want to start working with the people that you already have in your network, and this is where board members and even other people on your staff can be really helpful. So, no matter what, you always want to be thinking about who you know that knows that person that can help make an introduction. You could all go to lunch together or have a Zoom meeting together, but warm it up as much as you can, make that personal connection. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Who was that? That was Cindy.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, a couple more coming in. Annette, for a community-based organization looking for event sponsorships, is creating opportunities for specific business segments or groups who are typically competitors to come together to pool funds and support for a specific cause or group a strategy?
I would say no. That's not the best approach. When you are selling corporate sponsorship, you are there's you I'm going to say two things. Okay, I said I wasn't going to offer legal advice, but I'm going to mention something. So, one of the most important and most valuable benefits to a corporation when they're sponsoring an event is you're creating a universe where their competitors do not exist. Okay. So you're selling exclusivity is one of the benefits that you can offer. And corporations are so happy to pay for that. Now, I have heard it said from one source, I don't know if this is true. Again, this is where you want to ask your legal counsel, that exclusivity can trigger UBIT questions. And UBIT is unrelated business income tax. And so you generate the earned revenue, your expenses against that revenue, yield a net revenue that you've generated, and that can be taxed. Now, don't get alarmed by that. We all pay taxes. In fact, today we all pay taxes for most of us, unless you have some magic potion that you know of that we don't have to pay taxes, but we had to pay taxes today. And so there can be some earned revenue that is unrelated to your mission can be taxable. And exclusivity can be one that gets triggered, but you need to talk to your legal staff and your accountant about that for sure. To me, it is worth doing because it is really important to corporations. In fact, I just worked on a project for a client where I did some stakeholder interviews with some corporate partners, and it came up every single time that, yeah, well, please tell them not to have the other banks in town also as sponsors. So that's something that you want to be thinking about. Sorry if that's not the answer you wanted, Annette.
I have a follow-up clarifying question around that, Gail, before we go to
Uh-huh.
Madeline's question, just around if it's not about corporate sponsorship, but more about corporate funding, would that be a different scenario where pooled funding might make more sense and it's not as a much of a competitive space?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so.
Hmm.
I think so.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So Madeline, on one of the projects I work on, we have developed an affinity document that we want to share with corporate and philanthropic entities. Is it worthwhile to have an affinity document for corporate sponsors and another affinity document for philanthropic donors? We are using one for both currently.
Madeline, can you help me understand what an affinity document is? I'm not sure I know what that term means.
Hi.
Hi.
So the way that we're using it is we're kind of telling the recipient a little bit about who we are and elements of who we are that might align with uh, programs that they fund or areas of the sort of public sector that they would be interested in funding. And it's basically just to initiate a conversation with those entities without having a relationship with them. So we can send them something about who we are, and then we can do a follow-up phone call and basically have that document as a way to enter into conversations about ways that they could fund or contribute to the work that we're doing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to answer this from a marketing perspective because I'm not a philanthropic specialist. I focus more on earned revenue and corporate sponsorship. From a
Mhm.
marketing perspective, yeah, it's perfectly logical to have an overview of your organization. And I think you need to answer that question more than I need to answer that question because you probably know the corporate or philanthropic donors and contributors or entities better than I would know them. I'm sure
Mhm.
that at least 80% of the document is probably going to be the same because you're going to be the same organization no matter who funds you. And you can also develop one and then send it with a letter or an email that points out something that's really germane to that organization. So it really
Right.
stands out. But from a
Yeah.
marketing perspective, just think about what matters for each audience and then see where there's crossover and where there's something unique that needs to go. And it might just be a couple sentences that needs to be altered.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sure.
As human beings, we have an innate need to be unique and acknowledged. So just always remember that. Do
Yes.
that unique acknowledgement of each entity. It's really important. Great. Regina, let me make sure I'm not missing anyone. Yeah, Regina, is it more attractive to donors to have a cost per unit? For example, $25 to feed X amount of people. If so, how do you establish a cost per unit when providing social services?
Right. So again, I am not a philanthropic expert in my work, so that's a question that you would want to ask a fundraising consultant or, pose it to AFP, for example. But yeah, from a marketing perspective, I can say that it does, I don't know what the data shows on this, but I do know that it can really be encouraging, and it helps translate where the dollars go from a donor's perspective into what it means for your mission. I remember after Katrina hit New Orleans, Brad Pitt started a nonprofit organization. He's very interested in architecture, and he had worked with all these famous architects to design houses that would withstand the diminishing coastline of New Orleans and the Louisiana area. And I remember he built this really groovy website that was very interactive, and you could kind of tour the houses and it would say like, we need this much money for the air conditioners and this much money for the windows, and it was very compelling because it took you through the houses and it took you through, what he was doing. And so it was a way of engaging um in the houses, and was, and it was, of course, it was Brad Pitt too. So sorry guys, but it was Brad Pitt. So anyway, so it can be compelling. I don't know what the data is, but maybe the Chronicle of Philanthropy has some information or data on this, or the Association of Fundraising Professionals might have better data than I.
Thanks. From Amy, if you know that a past sponsor has run across challenging economic times, what is the best approach when reaching out for potential future sponsorships, especially when you believe and see that they are still doing sponsorships, but maybe their giving has decreased?
Well, it's a great question because one of the things that I really focus on um, and believe firmly is that, and this is baked into the philosophies of my business practice, is that there are human beings on the other side of that corporate logo, just as there are human beings in your organization. And so the first thing that I would do is, talk to them as a human being, like, wow, I've been reading the news about blah, blah, blah. I'm seeing that must be really hard. I'm working on a project with United Airlines right now. And, between the tariffs and TSA and now fuel costs, oh my gosh. So when we first started working, I said, oh my gosh, how are you doing this? She said, thank you so much. You're the first person to ask that question. To me, I couldn't even imagine having this discussion if we didn't talk about like, how is your job going? So yeah, these are human beings. And not only that, that's one layer. And then AI is making changes, as we all know, in every organization's structure. So they may personally be suffering. Their department could be diminished and they have increased workloads. And in addition to that, there are probably new strategies that factor in all this uncertainty, this socioeconomic change, these, geopolitical changes. So starting with like, how are you doing? How are these changes affecting your department, your work, your business, your whole or organization structure would be a great way to start. And by the way, corporate sponsorship and corporate giving are two different things. So again, make sure that you're not using giving language when you're talking about corporate sponsorship. But I think it still would be the same way. You're working with human beings and you want to focus there, see how
Mm,
they're doing. Does that help, Amy? Great.
yeah, nice. Um, we have time for maybe a couple more. So if anyone has another one, put it in chat. I see Stephanie. I have a question along the lines of exclusivity and those who are not paying for it. Is it standard practice to disclose who else is sponsoring or who else we are soliciting? For those who did not opt for the exclusive title sponsor, but came in at a lower level sponsorship, multiple banks or real estate agents, for example.
Um, well, it, if you did not have exclusivity, then, and you're putting, true marketing driven sponsor logos on your materials, say on your website or on your emails or your social media posts or whatever, however you're marketing, they're going to see who the other sponsors are. So it's not a secret. You are under no obligation to share the terms and conditions of any proposal with someone else. And in fact, I would suggest it's none of their business, and I wouldn't reveal any of the terms and conditions or any of what you negotiated. I just had in the same project that I talked about this other airline, I had another sponsor say, "Is that sponsor bigger than me? Blah, blah, their logo is bigger." And I was like, "Oh gosh, stop." You know. So anyway, so yeah, they don't need to know what the terms of the other companies are, and they don't also need to know who you're soliciting. But if you are offering exclusivity, then you don't want to solicit other businesses in those areas. And if you are if they don't want to pay for exclusivity, or I would say if you're not offering exclusivity, I would point that out to the sponsor because sponsors do assume that it's part of the deal. So I would tell them, and I would probably then also let them know if that's something of interest to them that you could include that in an option, in a sponsorship option. Does that answer your question, Stephanie? It's kind of a complex. I don't know that that was exactly what you wanted to hear, but that's yeah.
Great. Any final questions for Gail? Anything burning? Now's the time. Feel free to just come off mute. Burning questions.
Brad Pitt has a home in Monterey County,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, we're trying to network if anybody knows how to get a hold of Brad. Any other final thoughts? Otherwise, Gail, I think we can shift to resources.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first, I just want to thank Megan, thank you and your team for coming up with this idea and for being willing to collaborate. It was a pleasure to be here with you. I'm sure you're going to have more questions, and I will have more events and more topics and a lot more resources. So hopefully we'll connect again. So to support your journey ahead, there are several resources and gifts that I'm going to share. Megan is going to share with me the list of folks who signed up and who, registered to be part of this session today, whether it's through the recording or you were here live. So I'm going to send you a couple things. I did want to let you know that I did launch an online course about corporate sponsorship this year called From Pitch to Partnership, the Roadmap to Corporate Sponsorship Success. So if you learn, like a DIY approach to your learning and want to learn that way, that's a great way to, it's a great option to explore. A couple special gifts. I'm going to share with you two resources that I wrote. One is called The Guide to Earned Revenue, and it's a Q&A format with 3 different articles. One that I answered the questions, and the other 2 are answered by an attorney and a CPA. So that kind of will fill in some gaps for you and give you a little bit more information. Excuse me. And then another set of tips, which is called Getting Corporate Sponsors 20 Do's and 20 Don'ts, which are 40 tips about corporate sponsorship. So I'll go ahead and send those out to everybody. You'll also be subscribed to my newsletter, which comes out monthly. You can unsubscribe at any time. You won't hurt my feelings too much. But if it doesn't work for you, that's just fine. I don't want you to clutter up your inbox. I do have 2 blogs, one on my website, gailbauer.com/blog, and the other one is sponsorshipstrategist.com. So feel free to, poke around and read through anything else that I have. And again, as I said, I'll have other events coming up. And so I look forward to seeing you in another session. And I hope that today's session gave you a little bit more information, and mostly that you're ready to put on your entrepreneurial hat and start digging into where you have opportunities for corporate sponsorship or earned revenue, or even bolstering what you're already doing and helping those existing revenue forms get more efficient, grow, find new audiences, find new sponsors, even Brad Pitt. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gail.
You're welcome.
Just a couple of final thoughts. That was amazing. And I love Bauer Power. So cheers to your newsletter name. So thanks everyone for joining this and for those amazing resources. We will be following up with the recording, etc. So this doesn't have to be the end. I wanted to invite everyone to our next one. So we in May are going to be focused on human-centered AI, specifically for nonprofits. We've got 3 experts joining us on a panel that will be sharing what does human-centered AI even mean? How is that emerging in the nonprofit space? What are some best practices to keep in mind? What are some issues and pitfalls to look for? And really, what are some key ways that nonprofits are using AI in alignment with values to help advance the mission without leaving the humans behind? That is the core of this session. So we really hope you can just scan that QR code. We'll also be sending this out via our list, etc. So you'll see this coming your way soon, but we hope you'll join us for this next discussion and Q&A session so you can dive into this very current topic as well with us. And stay in touch. You can email me. I want to acknowledge Shebra, my colleague who's on this call as well, and the team behind the scenes as well. But please stay in touch if you want to know more about what we offer or just want to reconnect. If we haven't seen you in a while, we're here. We would love to talk with you soon. And again, thank you so much. And thanks, Gail, for joining us. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Megan. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.